Ah, we're live. Good Sabbath. Um, we are live for our second show on LambTube, and we're all here, or at least physically we're here. Mentally, I'm not so sure myself. I'm Frank,
I'm Misha, and
and
the not the Rebbe will be here just 2 seconds.
okay,
He's
not a
he's
problem,
on
not a
his
problem.
way. But yeah, this is two and a half
While
opinions. We're back for a second go round to see how much fun we can have. And wow, we hopefully we are well and properly organized this go round.
I'm here. I had to deal with one other thing and then get something to drink real quick because new show, new time, and we did a shameless plug on Torah with Friends. This show is coming on. Torah with Friends comes on earlier now. This is a new show for Lamb Radio, and it's really good. It's something that Frank had started years ago on. Um, oh gosh, what was that? What was wasn't Skype?
oh,
Frank, what was that we used to do the show years ago? Um, what was the venue?
well, we all
The
started out on.
Pal Talk.
Well, yeah, we started on Pal Talk,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
then Mark started what you call it, some kind of radio thing,
Yeah, well, you're kind of buffering
uh,
here, but no, the
kind
point
of like.
the point that I was getting to is that Frank started a show many years ago on Pal Talk where we would spend most of Sabbath just on Pal Talk talking about the Torah portion, and we'd read the entire portion, and then we'd go through it step by step, and it was really fun and interesting because everybody was able to come in. Well, Marcus has started a show on Sabbath, and it's very similar to that for about 2.5, 3.5 hours from 1 o'clock until 3:30, 4 o'clock Central Time, where we just go through, we read the whole Torah portion, and different people and guests. Generally, it's the hosts of Lamb Radio that give their opinions on it, and it's fun and it's entertaining. The horrible thing about it is. I, I have to be careful because some of the things that we bring up there is the same things we're going to bring up here, but this show we have the opinions about topics, whereas the other one is they go through the entire portion. So I gave some shameless plugs for our show, so maybe we actually have more than 2.5 listeners tonight. It's a long way to get around to saying we might have more people listening for a change.
Well, this should be fun to see how it turns out. So, if I'm not mistaken, our current Torah portion is Parshat Bo, which should be delving into the final acts of the 10 plagues, the final scenario before we finally get to be pushed out of Egypt at all due haste.
It's interesting you say that because yeah, God said they'll kick you out, and that's pretty much what they did. But we sometimes overlook that aspect that the Egyptians actually kicked us out because of everything that was going on. So Frank, where do we go?
Yep. Okay. First off, Jesse, what part of the portion are you going to read? What aliyah?
Hmm. I'm thinking we'll just stick with the first one because we're going to be bouncing all around this portion. We've got multiple areas in the sixth and the second portion, and looks like we're going to be all over the board. So let's just give them the synopsis.
Synopsis. What's a synopsis?
I don't know, Brain. I'll just read the first portion and just assume that's a synopsis.
Yeah, we'll do the first portion and then the cliff notes.
Yes, all the cliff notes.
Uh, computer is this laptop that has a. I'm sorry if things are buffering, but making it sweet needs to do. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but Frank, you're buffering so bad. It's one thing for your picture to freeze up, but now we're having difficulties in even hearing you.
Sorry. Yeah, it's an older laptop that has a camera that works because I couldn't get the other one set up. I apologize.
So you are trying to hunt down the blessing so that we can get rolling. So while he's doing that, let's see what we can delve into when it comes to at least explaining to people what we might be trying to achieve in their level of understanding for tonight's show.
Yeah, Frank, yell at us when you're ready, and we'll come back to you for the blessing. So, how about this? Do you have like a 10-second, 20-second recap of the Torah portion? Do we have a full recap? What's the full recap? And then we can go to the two or three topics that we're going to delve into.
Well, a very 10 to 20-second recap. Let's see. Go. Um, we deal with locusts. We deal with darkness. We deal with the death of the firstborn. And we also deal with the reaction and interaction with Pharaoh and both before, during, and after the plague in some form or fashion throughout it all to show what God meant by hardening a heart. And then from there, after the death of the firstborn, the Israelites are rushed out with all due haste, including saying, "Here, take my gold, take my silver, just anything to get you out of my hair." And from there, we are told where they go, what the Passover celebration from here on out shall pertain to commemorate this day. And we are given at least the first few locations that they stop on the way.
Okay. I think what a lot of people
I'm
focus in
ready.
on, yeah, I think what a lot of people focus in on this Torah portion is they run straight to the Pesach, because that kind of seems like it's the grand finale and the highlight of it. But we're going to look at a couple of other things that goes on leading up to the Pesach. There's so many teachings on the Passover and so many different views and opinions and aspect of Passover. Tonight, I think what we're going to look at is we're going to focus on these last couple of plagues, the interactions with Moshe and Paro and God, and what's really going on here. So, Frank, if you're ready, go ahead and start with the blessing. Jesse, you're going to read the first Aliyah.
Jesse.
I'm ready.
Okay. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam, asher kol ha'aminu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai in haTorah. Melech Naaman.
Amen. Exodus chapter 10, verse 1 through 11, read from Chabad.org. The Lord said to Moses, "Come to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, in order that I may place these signs of mine in his midst, and in order that you tell into the ears of your son and your son's son how I made a mockery of the Egyptians, and that you tell of my signs that I placed in them, and you will know that I am the Lord." So Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh and said to him, "So said the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, and they will worship me. For if you refuse to let them go, behold, tomorrow I am going to bring locusts into your borders, and they will obscure the view of the earth, and no one will be able to see the earth, and they will eat the surviving remnant which remains for you from the hail, and they will eat all your trees that grow out of the field, and your houses, and the houses of all your servants, the houses of all the Egyptians will be filled, which your fathers and your fathers' fathers did not see since the day they were on the earth until this day, wherein he turned and left Pharaoh. Pharaoh's servants said to him, how long will this one be a stumbling block to us? Let the people go, and they will worship their God. Don't you yet know that Egypt is lost? Therefore Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh, and he said to them, go, worship the Lord your God. Who are going? Moses said, with our youth and with our elders we will go, with our sons and with our daughters, with our flocks and with our cattle we will go, for it is a festival to the Lord, of the Lord to us. So Pharaoh said to them, so may the Lord be with you, just as I will let you and your children, young children out. See that evil is before your faces. Not so. Let the men go now and worship the Lord, for that is what you request. And he chased them out from before Pharaoh.
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet b'kaye olam nata b'tukenu. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah. Oh, Melech Naaman. I apologize for buffering. Sorry. So, am I going first?
I was assuming so.
Okay. All right. Let me start my timer. 20 minutes. Start. Okay. These are my assumptions. Last week we had the first 7 wonders or plagues. This week we have the last 3 wonders or plagues. Locust, darkness, death of the firstborn. I was talking last week about the 10 Sephirot. And hold on just a second. Come on. There are 10 Sephirot, or weak physical attributes of God. In my opinion, are the 3 mental, if you will, attributes of God. Now, I don't mean just. I'm about Hokmah, which is wisdom, uh, Bina, which is understanding, and Keter, divine crown. So this week we have the locust, which is a darkness on the Egyptians' land, the property. We have darkness, which is a darkness of the mind, if you will. Okay. They can't understand, they can't move or won't move. And then we have firstborn, which is a darkness upon the soul. Because heaven forbid somebody loses a child, it is devastating. It's devastating. So from last week's, there were 7 revealed attributes. This week's, there are 3 hidden attributes, as in these have to do with the thinking, the feeling within the body of what's being transpired. So that's my these are the last signs that God needs to uh, give the Egyptians so that they will kick Israel out of Egypt, as Chris had said. Um, let's see if I can put it another way, or maybe make it a little bit. At least I hope I'm there was an article I posted on 2.5 Opinions Facebook last week that had to do with 7 attributes of the tree or God, and visual or open to everybody, whereas the last 3 are spiritual or concealed. If you look at a person, these last 3 are within. A person looking at you can't necessarily see these 3 attributes. They have to experience them with their mind. So this is what I'm going by. We have God giving the 10 plagues or wonders. We have God giving us the 10 commandments, and we have from a Jewish understanding, we have 10 attributes of God or the tree. And in my mind, in my thoughts, in my reading, that's how these 3 each other. So, any questions so far?
Yeah, Frank, you're going off into something that sometimes is very difficult to explain, let alone understand. The Sephiroth are. This is coming from a deeper mystical side of Judaism, where there are 10 attributes. Since we cannot describe God, it's an impossibility because He's so far beyond our understanding and our reasoning, that we can at least describe in terms that we can understand certain attributes about Him. There is an attribute of wisdom, an attribute of mercy, an attribute of justice, strength, knowledge, wisdom, and we can go on. So we have these different attributes, and the mystical side of Judaism sets them up as these are the Sephiroth, and it looks like a tree. And they'll actually come back and say, this is like the tree, or this is the tree of life. And like any tree, certain attributes are very visible and prominent, but then there's certain attributes that are somewhat shaded and hidden to us, and we don't fully understand it. So when Frank is saying you look at somebody, you experience an individual, whether it be your spouse, your children, your friends, your boss. You experience them on no less than 3 levels. One is the in your face. This is what I get. Chris has a hat on. He's not a very pleasant looking individual, and he looks rather frumpy. Okay, so that's one one aspect. And then another aspect is, well, these are his words, and these are his mannerisms, and this is how he teaches, and this is what he does. That would be another aspect. And then a third aspect is, well, what is the driving force behind Chris and what he thinks and how he does things? It's not so much what he does now. I want to know how and why he does them, and that's kind of the hidden side. And so when we get into these last plagues, and it's an interesting way of looking at the plagues. But when we get into these last plagues, we're looking at something that is dark. Hence, we see darkness in all of it. The darkness that the locusts cause, the darkness that is so heavy that it can be felt, and then the darkness of losing your firstborn child for no explicable reason whatsoever. That darkness that covers the soul. This is an inner darkness that's felt outwards and inner. So it comes from the inner, but it can be expressed in the outwards ways. So we start approaching these last 3 plagues from the outward aspect of the locusts were so thick and so heavy. That's the physical. The locusts are the physical. That it creates something of a darkness. It covers the ground. We can't really see it without stepping on them. But if we're focusing only on the physical, we're missing something here. And if you missed it, then I'm going to shove it in your face by causing the 3 days of extreme darkness to where you can't even move from the spot of where you are. And then if that wasn't enough to get your attention, I'm going to cause a darkness on your soul so devastating that not just your firstborn, but the firstborn of everything, the firstborn bird, the firstborn animal, horse, cattle, camel, I don't care. Any firstborn will die. Everything will be screaming in agony of this darkness that has beset your soul. So when Frank is delving into these things, sometimes it's extremely difficult to explain, and it's even harder to understand if we haven't been fully grounded in several years of studying the Torah portion itself, because there's so many phases here. Did I do you any justice at all, Frank?
No, that's what I was. I don't have the eloquent speech of a field grade officer.
No, my mind is a reeling torrent of. No, I'm not going to go into that.
Let's not do that again.
So, Jesse, any thoughts on what I said?
I'm pretty sure how our third compatriot worded it, nailed it quite thoroughly on the head to make it more fluid and understandable. It is rather interesting to portray the attributes of God through plagues when most people try to portray the attributes of God through a more pleasant and less confrontational set of means.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because we have, Charlton Heston and the Ten Commandments, and what's presented to us is a very G-rated, cut down, cleaned up version of what's going on. We've got plagues and there might be some bad stuff, but we're not going to focus on the bad stuff. We're really focusing on Charlton Heston and the Jews floating off in a magic carpet into the sunset, and they lived happily ever after. It's very G-rated. Yeah, but if you think about it, it's a very G-rated version. When we look at what's going on in these last 3 weeks, no, it's not G-rated. This is PG-16. This is possibly R-rated because this is horrific. There's a lot of blood. There's a lot of death. There's a lot of arguing. There's several heated discussions. This Torah portion, we get into such the heated discussion between Moses and Pharaoh that Moses turns around and walks away in anger. This is down to the earth stuff. And sometimes we miss that.
Yep.
Sometimes we look at the overarching story, and since we already know the end of the story, we don't slow down and focus on some of the nuances that's really going on here, such as hardening Pharaoh's heart. I've always had a very tough time with this. God, you're going to harden Pharaoh's heart. That's what God told Moses from the very beginning at the burning bush. That's what God tells Moses continually throughout. He's going to harden Pharaoh's heart. I don't like that. Oh, gee, Chris, are you going to argue with the Torah? No, I don't like that the God that is the source of justice just removed free will. If we have free will and God comes in and possesses me and uses me like a marionette and a muppet to where I am no longer exercising my free will to do what I want, then it's actually God's fault. It's no longer my fault. So God, when you harden Pharaoh's heart, I'm sorry, God, that's your fault. That's on you. That's not on Pharaoh. You can't blame Pharaoh for this one. Think about this in a court of justice, because God is our righteous judge. He is the source of justice, the cause of justice. So what's really going on here? In our Torah portion, we see that and by the way, there's actually 3 different words used for hardening when it talks to God hardening Pharaoh's heart. There's 3 different words. Each of those words have specific meanings. But on our Torah portion, we're talking about something that's very, very interesting, to say the least. We see that what Jesse just read, that God says, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart, and so Moses, you go and talk to Pharaoh. All right, now again, think about this. Is God really going to go in and manipulate? Is he going to possess? Is he going to magically, mystically, esoterically force Pharaoh into being rebellious?
If he was going to force anything like that, that would be smack dab.
It goes against free will.
It's a very bold statement against free
Yeah,
will.
it really is. But let's see what our Torah portion says. Verse 3. So Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh and said to him, so said the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to bow down to me, Pharaoh? Think about this for 2 seconds. Pharaoh sees Moses and Aaron is telling, because again, Aaron is the voice piece of Moses. Our Torah portion says that it's Moses saying it, but remember back at the burning bush, Moses, you don't want to speak? I'll give you Aaron so that he'll be your mouthpiece. You'll be like God. Aaron will be the prophet. So anytime we see a prophet, we can tie back to this. It says that Moses said it, but it's actually Aaron. All Pharaoh sees is 2 Jews standing before him saying, how long are you, Pharaoh, O king of the Egyptians, going to refuse to acknowledge us? You should be bowing down before us.
To add more spin to that, there's that.
You're not coming through, Jesse.
I don't know. Are we missing something here?
Hello.
All right. So the point is that how God is going to harden Pharaoh's heart is he's going to use Moses.
I was muted. Oops.
Yeah, he's going to use Moses to dig at Pharaoh's ego. Pharaoh's the king. Pharaoh says, kill him. The person's already dead. Pharaoh doesn't even remember him anymore. Pharaoh says, methinks I would like a gray poupon on my falafel. And it happens. And here is somebody daring to come into him and saying, how long are you going to refuse to humble yourself and bow down to me? That is the grossest insult. That's like me saying, Jesse, how long are you going to be so stupid to not recognize that I'm more important than you? You should be on your knees bowing to me. That's going to tick you off. That's any person is going to say, who the heck are you? And that's exactly the reaction here from Pharaoh.
For me, just a basic individual, sure, it would tick me off. But to make it even worse, the Prince of Egypt worded it perfectly every time Pharaoh would speak. I am Egypt, the morning and the evening star. If I say day is night, it will be written. So you tell me, being Pharaoh here, and being a god of Egypt.
And we're going to see that throughout this whole Torah portion, because comes a point in time where Pharaoh's going to say, okay, all right, you know what, I give. So just so I understand this, who are you going to take with you? Well, we're going to take the kids, and we're going to take the women, and we're going to take our cattle and goats and sheep, and we're all going to go out. No. You can take everybody but the kids. I mean, Pharaoh's trying to be Trump. He's gonna negotiate this, and it doesn't work out, and Pharaoh gets upset. And the very last negotiation technique we have is Pharaoh comes in and says, okay, so once again, work this through with me, Moses. Who are you going to take? Well, we're going to take the kids, we're going to take the women, we're going to take the cattle. And Pharaoh says, no, you're not going to do this. No, I'm sorry. It's just the opposite. Pharaoh says, so you say you're going to take all these things. And Moses says, you know what? You did say cattle. Yeah, we're going to take the cattle. Not only that, Pharaoh, you're going to give us cattle that we can use to sacrifice for you. That's like Trump saying the Mexicans don't want to pay for the wall. Fine, the wall just got 10 feet taller. And we see this attitude going back and forth. It's constant jab. It's a constant poke in the eye to the pride and the ego of Pharaoh. And that's what this whole thing is about, is man's pride and man's ego. As soon as we start defending our own ego and our own pride, we've lost. And that's what we see here. I'm sorry, I'm taking us way off of the topic with all this. So, Frank, you jump right in here.
Well, this is my 20 minutes. I only got 2 minutes left. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, you were right. It is God is hardening his heart, allowing Aaron and Moses to, as you said, poke their finger in his eye and keeping him upset because this is Pharaoh. He is, quote unquote, the man god of Egypt. So, of course he's going to get ticked off. But I wanted to go back to one point you made, which is something I was going to bring up. Well, we're going to take this, and Moses says, we're going to have you give us cattle to sacrifice too. That wasn't in the original thing that God told him. Now, was it? I mean, he said it would spoil Egypt, but he didn't say anything about before it.
Yeah, we go back to the original deal. So, Trump's art of the deal. The original deal was, hey, Pharaoh, we want to go out 3 days. We're going to go out 3 days, and we're going to have a celebration to God. And we need to take some animals with us to sacrifice because we really don't know what it is that God's wanting from us out there. That was the original deal. And this deal keeps on growing. And now Moses, oh my gosh, the chutzpah. Yeah, oh yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the cattle, Pharaoh. By the way, you're going to pitch in too. Really? I mean, this is wonderful. I love it. I mean, talk about. And I'm not going to go into the racial slurs, but wow, this is amazing. I love it. But what's behind the story here, Frank? I mean, I like what you're talking about the Sephiroth, and we're going into a period of darkness here. This is the concealed side of things, and this argument's coming out under the concealment. When we're going into 3 plagues that deal with concealment and darkness, now Pharaoh, we're talking about darkness and concealment. But what's actually happening is light is being shown on your heart. Here's the true heart of Pharaoh, his ego and his pride.
Right. Exactly. Okay. My 20 minutes is up. Who's next?
Oh, yeah, I don't have 20 minutes because I will manipulate the entire show. So, I'll jump in everywhere and anywhere. So Jesse's got some points. Jesse,
Okay.
Jeff. Well, I can't say it was Jesse. There is it's out on the
Jesse
internet.
with influence.
Yeah, Jesse with influence. But we're all bread thieves. We all steal from other teachers, and really, what we bring to anything, any teacher worth his grain of salt is someone that has learned from others, and through bringing in from this teacher and bringing in from this teacher and bringing in from this and weaving it into a wonderful tapestry is able to present something else. Now Jesse and I and the boys, for a little while now, we got hooked on it's called alephbeta.org. Is it Aleph Beta, Jesse? Help me out.
Yes, Aleph Beta.
Alephbeta.org. A beautiful way of presenting teachings. I mean, it's fabulous what Rabbi Foreman does here. I think it's very deep. It's very enriched in Judaism, but at the same time, my 10-year-old son craves it and longs for more. I can't get enough of it, so it covers the full spectrum and gambit of how Rabbi Foreman is able to teach and his whole staff. So there's some great tidbits there. Foreman brought up a couple things that Jesse and I have been chasing, and it deals with a previous Torah portion and this Torah portion, and that there is a correlation there. And Jesse, what is that correlation? Go with it.
Well, let's at least start at the basic of it all. And this is the way Rabbi Foreman brought it to our attention to begin with.
Microphone.
I'm not muted this time. Am I live this time?
Yeah, I can hear you. Just bring it
Can hear.
closer.
All right. There we go. But no. Trying to bring it as close as I can to my mouth. Um, but no, the when Rabbi Foreman helped us obtain this sort of enlightenment, it was brought to our attention by the fact that two Tor- two sections in Torah, a section in our portion currently, and a section in Genesis dealing with the story of Joseph, are linked in more than just story. And the way it was portrayed to us is right off the bat, the first word most people can usually recognize is when Judah is going to his father and saying, "We need to bring Benjamin back with me. We need to bring him back, otherwise this man will not let us get food." He later on says, had we have not dilly dallied here, to use the turn of phrase, we would have been there and back twice now with food. Now, the interesting thing is, right off the bat, most people, if you're reading the Hebrew, you will come across with hitmame, which in the in the way that it's worded in Judah's mindset, he's having to word it for him and his brothers. So it's hitmamenu, ki um, ki lole hitmamenu, implying had we have not tarried, we would be gone back. Well, if we look into the
Jesse, if you don't mind, let me read that because I want to make sure everybody's understanding where you're going with this and where you're coming from. In Genesis chapter 43, this is back in Torah portion Miketz, Genesis 43, and it is this discussion with Judah and his father. And Judah says in verse 7, they said, "The man asked about us and about our family, saying, 'Is your father still alive? Do you not have a brother?' And et cetera, et cetera." This is in response to Israel saying to Judah, "Why did you even tell him that you had another brother? Every time you guys go out and I send one of the sons of Rachel, they disappear. I'm not going to send you another one, so don't ask again." And in verse 8 it says, and Yehuda said to Israel, his father, "Send the lad Benjamin with me, and we will get up and go, and we will live and not die, both we and you, and also your young children. I will guarantee, I will be the Arov for him. From my hand you can demand him. If I do not bring him to you and stand him up before you, it will be I who have sinned against you from my birth. For had we not dilly-dallied, we could have already returned from Egypt twice." Verse 10. And so Jesse is focusing on, had we not tarried, had we not dilly-dallied, had we not been sitting here wasting time, we could have already been to Egypt and returned twice. And there's a couple words here. There's not just a couple, there's 6 words. Just in this conversation between Judah and Israel. And those 6 words are very odd and strange words. They're not normal. They're not the common words used for how they're translated. Those exact same words show up in our Torah portion. And what's even more striking, they show up in the exact same order. It's one thing, it could be a coincidence if they showed up, all 6 words showed up, even though they're uncommon words. It could be a coincidence that 6 uncommon words could show up the same in another Torah portion. Is it coincidence that they show up in the exact same order and they're almost mirrored to each other? Coincidence? Like Brad Scott
Coincidence
says.
is not a kosher word.
There you go. So now, starting off on the one, Terry, go with that, Jesse. I just wanted to make sure everybody has the full understanding and the backstory of what we're dealing with here.
I understand. It was coming off a little coarse and wondering where I was coming from with the way I was wording it. I could tell that very quickly. But with the way that it is expounded on, we will have to jump over to our portion bow, which where our section that we're going to be dealing with it is in chapter 12, and I'm trying to find its exact location. The
I think what you're looking for.
wording.
Yeah, I think what you're looking for, and don't struggle with the too much of the specifics on this. Just really just go ahead and get to the heart of it, because what you're going to be looking for really shows up at the end of our Torah portion when it says that they didn't have time to let their bread rise, the dough rise, therefore they left in haste. And that same word for tarry that Judah uses, had we not tarried here, we could have returned from Egypt twice.
That same word is actually used in the same fashion that they were not allowed to tarry
There.
for the bread to rise.
Yeah, so we see that in one place, had we not tarried, we could have returned, shav. And what's the word for tarry here? Because it's a strange word for tarry. You said it earlier. Lahit mameh, we could have shav twice.
In the Judah and Jacob situation, it's hitmamenu. In the situation with the Israelites leaving Egypt, it's lahitmameh.
Yeah, so lahit mamenu, had we not tarried, we could have shav twice. In our Torah portion, it's flipped upside down. Had we more time to tarry, our bread could have rised. But in our Torah portion, this is our second return from Egypt. And that's what's fascinating about all this. We see that there truly is an intercorrelation, a tie between the Joseph story, and specifically with Judah, and now Judah and all the tribes, all of Israel, are coming out. They're returning for the second time. Go ahead, Jesse.
I think you're actually covering it pretty well, very quickly on my end. you're nailing all the points before I can reach them. Considering it's even more fascinating when you actually read the Hebrew itself, because as we go down the line and down the entire chain, we notice at least four other locations, if we include the way that the tarrying subject was worded. Four other locations where the comparison is the same usage of the word, the same amount of presentation. Like for example, for example, the only, as you mentioned, the flipping of the word of uh, of the choice of explanation for for the desire for tarrying. In Judah and Jacob's situation, it is the concept of our desire was to not tarry, but we were forced to tarry anyways. In the Israelites leaving Egypt subject, we would like to tarry, but we are forced to leave as quickly as possible. It is a sort of this would be as Frank and my father tend to say quite frequently, the overarching bookends, if you will, considering this is the completion of a very, very long tale, very, very long story, 430 years to be exact.
In that 430 years, what you're talking about is when we go down to the very end of our Torah portion, in verse 40, it says, "And the habitation of the children of Israel that they dwelled in Egypt was 430 years. Now, that sounds great in English, but when we see it in Hebrew, the root word is, and the staying of the children of Israel, that they stayed in Egypt, was 430 years. And we have this double use of a word that is, it's not a common way to say to stay. And so it's interpreted, or it's translated a couple of different ways. But the root of the word is shav.
Which usually shav is primarily used to return, to come back.
Oh, and so Judah says to Israel, had we not tarried or dallied about, we could have shaved twice. And here in our Torah portion, shav is used in one verse twice. Had we not shaved, or and the shav of the children of it. Please understand, any audience that knows anything about Hebrew whatsoever, I am truncating this, focusing only on the root of the word. So had we not shav, had the children of Israel not shav, they shav in Egypt. So the root of the word is used twice, 430 years. But when we go back and we count how many years they were actually, that Israel, Jacob, and his sons lived in Egypt, it wasn't 430 years. It was 215. What's half of 430? 215. Now that's interesting. So when did the 430 start? And that takes us back to Abraham and a different teaching. The point of what we're getting to here is there's 6 words that come up in this rendition between Judah and Israel that are being repeated throughout the entire Torah portion with us here, and it all deals with this word shav, meaning return. Now, shav doesn't necessarily mean return as much as it means a cause of returning. Now, here's something funny. Haha! Shav doesn't just mean return. The root shav is used in 3 different ways. One is to return, one is to stay, cause to stay, cause to leave or return. But the third one, very obscure, is
This one you have to actually dive for the root
because
inside a word.
yeah, and you got to be careful sometimes when you're using Hebrew. But the root for the word capture, the root word is shav. So shav can mean return, shav can mean stay, and the root of shav is used in the word capture. And we have Joseph, our first one that was captured by his brothers and sold into slavery, who rises to be a prince that entices his family to come down before they can return the second time to Canaan. And throughout this whole experience, we delve into not just the purpose, but the way that God brings about redemption or salvation. And it's a bloody, horrible, terrible mess filled with plagues and filled with judgment. It's not a pretty sight.
To expound on that, Judah had to make reconciliation with his father to bring back Benjamin. Hence the statement of if we would not have tarried, we would have been to Egypt and back. But to sort of play on his words, I think God has a sense of humor here, considering that technically, based on the way the story is presented, it is Joseph trying to save Israel, but Judah had not yet reconciled fully with Joseph. So Joseph was the cause of Israel's tarrying in Egypt before their second return.
Now that's an interesting take, and we're really delving into a side story of a side story of a side story, because it really is. But it's a wonderful take on it, because when we go back to the Joseph story, if you recall, we're reading and studying about Joseph, and then suddenly out of the blue, there's a side story about Judah and Tamar and a bunch of kids. And meanwhile, back on the ranch, Joseph is marrying Potiphar, or Potiphar's daughter, and we go off into some strange things. So it's a story within a story, but yet Judah still plays a key role. And the end of the story is our Torah portion now, where Judah finally comes to grips. It's one thing to tell Dad, hey, Dad, I get it. You lost one. You got another one. I mean, what about the rest of us? Are we are we corned beef or corn hashies or whatever? I mean, what are we? But I get it. You got one favorite son left over here, Benjamin. But had you let us take Benjamin, then we could have returned twice already. But what Judah is still concealing, going back to Frank's point earlier, Judah's concealing the fact that it's one thing, Judah, for you to take ownership, because this is Judah's prize moment. This is his moment in the spotlight. This is the big step towards redemption for Judah, is by taking responsibility for Benjamin, Rachel's son. Are we off the air? I saw Frank just disappear. So
no, we're good.
Okay, so this is a pinnacle moment in Judah's experience. He's willing to take responsibility. He says, I will be the arov for Benjamin. Arov. Wait a minute. In our Torah portion, we have an erev.
A mixture.
Coming out of Egypt. Judah says, I will be the arov, the payment for Benjamin going into Egypt. And when we come out of Egypt, we have an erev coming with us. Full circle. Story come to conclusion. Judah is concealing, but in our Torah portion here, we're seeing that the things that are concealing are really to shine a light on your pride and your ego. Judah, you're still concealing that thing. You're the one that said, let us sell Joseph. And tell you, Judah, you come to grips with that, and that is revealed. Then we're going to dilly-dally.
A little longer.
We're going to tarry here just a little bit longer. But when the time comes, we're leaving in a hurry. And I find that fascinating when you see that. Yeah,
like you wanted to.
Yeah. When you see the words in Hebrew and the two Torah portions coming together, and you see the intermixing, you just look at and you just got to go. The wisdom that's revealed in Torah. The more I uncover, the more I want. It makes me even more hungry. I was hungry enough coming to the table, but the more I eat, the more hungry I am of eating this up because, it's all intermixed. And what is the whole point of not this Torah portion, but this Torah portion and the whole Exodus story is so that God would be known and revealed. He'd be revealed to Mitzrayim. It says
2-minute warning.
Okay. Tehu, what is Tehu Mitzrayim Ani Hashem. The purpose of these plagues is so that I will be revealed or be known to Egypt. But in this Torah portion, it changes. It's no longer so that God would be revealed or known to Egypt. Now in this Torah portion, God says the reason for this plague, and he's really talking about the firstborn, the death of the firstborn, Bekorot, is so that I will be known to Israel. However, we got to wait till next week until it finally is told to us at this parting of the Red Sea. At this time, Israel believed in God and his servant Moshe. Wait a minute. The three signs were to do that very thing. That was a couple weeks ago. That was 2-3 parashots ago. That's what the signs were for. You remember the blood?
The signs were dealt with.
You remember the blood? The water turning into blood? And what's the last act? The parting of the Red Sea. And it's not until they come across the Red Sea and Pharaoh and his armies are crushed under the weight of the Yom Soph, the Sea of Reeds. Oh, Now we have the completion of the third sign of the water turning into blood. Pharaoh and his host are killed by water.
There's a
And it,
signpost up
In the
ahead.
same fashion.
It says
but
you're entering the Twilight Zone.
yes,
The Twilight Zone.
exactly, Frank. And it's at that point in time when the Torah tells us, and this is next week, that that is when Israel believed in God and they believed in his servant Moses. So we have three signs, and those three signs are split up into three different plagues each. But the one plague, the only thing that really was a plague, the plague, echad, is the death of the firstborn, and that's a different story. So since Frank is telling me that my time is up, I got time with everybody. So go ahead.
It seems
Yeah.
like it's our time in this case, considering we kind of shared that 20 minutes.
But that's okay. That's what this show is about. It's having opinions and sharing information, and maybe an insight or two, and that's what it's about. So, hey, Jeremy said he's on and watching us, and I told him to ask questions. So, I don't see him showing up in the chat room. Jeremy, are you chicken?
Yeah, so there's so many things here, and it would be hard to recap. And of course, we've danced around and danced over the whole Passover issue. A lot of people want to focus on the Passover because it's kind of dealt with here. If you don't mind, I'm going to bring in one obscure little point as we close out the show tonight, and then I'll let Frank, you, and Jesse try to recap and close up while I interject 50 more times. Um, and that is
Not wrong.
yeah, as you read through the Torah portion, and we're finally leaving. Hurrah! Yay! Let the pigeons loose, and we're leaving. We've despoiled because we have silver and gold that we asked for. We have cattle
And
and
garments and
yeah, and we're leaving, and all of a sudden we get this whole teaching on the Passover, and that's great. But Passover's done. Bellies are full from matzah and lamb the night before, and the scary. It's really got to be a horrific ordeal that whole night. So I'm pretty sure a lot of bloodshot eyes as we're leaving the next day, and all of a sudden the Torah breaks. It pauses for commercials and station identification type of thing. It pauses there, and God gives us laws about the firstborn. The firstborn must be sacrificed. The firstborn humans must be redeemed. And then some weird stuff about a donkey and the firstborn donkey and really intricate, crazy stuff there. And then we go back on and we're going and we go by the route of this, and then we get to the Sea of Reeds. And then, you gotta question. You gotta pause for a moment. What's the purpose for giving us instructions or mitzvot, laws, about the redemption of the firstborn and sacrifice of the firstborn in the midst of this wonderful event of our salvation and our freedom?
I would say that I'm going to jump to the Prince of Egypt again, just because it's a good source material.
Be careful, because I got a reason for my question.
The,
it's
if you listen to the song as they have just finished crossing the Red Sea, their song "There Can Be Miracles," they actually spend a little bit of time actually singing in Hebrew. One of the lines in it, "Ashira le Adonai ki gaoga," I will sing unto the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. And then they do part of the Mika Muka. Well, then they say, Nahita Vahastacha Amzu Galata. In your love, you lead the people you redeemed.
okay. What's that got to do with the Bekor, the first? The Bekorot, the firstborn, the first of the harvest, the first of the animals, the first of humans. Because that's what I'm getting to is we're getting to the song, we're getting to the revelation. We're about to experience full salvation in its totality.
How many times does
Not
God
only will
say?
we.
How many times does God say Israel is His firstborn?
Oh,
That
wait a
is
minute. That's how we started out. 2 weeks ago, we started out.
exactly.
Pharaoh,
God, Israel is my firstborn.
Israel's my firstborn. You don't let my firstborn go, I will kill your firstborn. This is not new in this Torah portion. God already warned Pharaoh that. He told
Exactly.
Moses already told Pharaoh from the very beginning, before the turning the Nile red with blood. He warned him, Israel's my firstborn, let him go. If you don't, I will kill your firstborn. And this is the culmination of that very promise right there. But like I said, now as we're leaving, we get a special instruction. And this instruction is not like a commemorative. This is not commemorating the death of the firstborn or the salvation of Israel being God's firstborn. Um,
You mean there's no commemorative coin that I can buy from the Franklin Mint that says, hey, leading the children of Israel out of bondage?
exactly. Now, the instruction on Passover, we have one Passover. There's only one Passover. It happened in Egypt. Didn't happen in Israel? No, it happened in Egypt. It happened in the midst of chaos, of confusion, of darkness. It happened in the midst of the depths of depravity of humankind. That's when the Passover happened. There's only one Passover.
Every Passover
Every
after that.
Passover after that, the commandment is this is a commemorative of that Passover.
Exactly.
Right.
But now that we've had that Passover, we're coming out of it, and we're going to have instruction on redeeming the firstborn humans and sacrificing their firstborn animals, and how to redeem a firstborn animal, and then something about the donkeys. That one's a really weird one. I have no idea. But I've got to still come back to the instruction of redeeming the firstborn. It's not commemorative. This isn't commemorative. Why? What's going on with this instruction? I pose to you that because Israel is the firstborn, Israel has always been the firstborn. But in order to redeem the firstborn of the nations had to die. The firstborn carries a special significance and a special weight. The Bakor. Bakor is in Hebrew, it's three Hebrew words: Bet, Kof, Resh. In gematria, which I don't really dabble in gematria, but every once in a while gematria does serve its purposes. Gematria is the numerology, and it's tying significance of certain words based on the numerical value of the letters of that word to other words, to find a tie and a correlation there. And I find there's some value in that, but I'm always very careful with it. But in this case, it is interesting and striking. The bet. Anybody have an idea of what the numerical value for bet is? Aleph, bet. So two. Dos. Two.
Dos
So,
Equis.
so,
Dos
so,
cerveza.
so bet has a numerical value of 2, and the kof, kof is a numerical value of 20. Resh has a numerical value of 200. So we have an exponential increase, 220, 200. And that's for Bekor, firstborn. So firstborn comes from what? Oh, the papa, the father, Av. What's the numerical value of Av? Aleph, 1, Bet, 2. So it takes the Aleph combining with Chava, Eve, to bring about the firstborn. The firstborn, we have the father, the mother, that's 2, brings about the firstborn, which begins with 2, and the firstborn's purpose is to exponentially express the purpose of the father. The firstborn, out of all his siblings, is closest to his parents in age. The firstborn is the one that passes on what he has learned from his father to his siblings. The firstborn always is an influence and a teaching to his younger siblings. Always. It's built within ourselves. Our genetics is built within ourselves. If it's nothing else, maybe it's just the ego of us. But the firstborn exponentially expresses the components of the Father. And God just said, Israel is my Bekorot. Wow. No wonder Israel is to be a light unto the nations. Now, the Bekor is not always the firstborn. We can see that in Joseph. Joseph wasn't the firstborn. Sometimes esoterically or spiritually the firstborn. I mean, we get this even with Abraham. Isaac wasn't the first. Ishmael was. But the Bekor, the spiritual significance, the one that would express the ideals, the motif, and the purpose of the Isaac. So we see in some Bekor does not have to be with specific genealogy or placement, but it's dealing with the spiritual makeup. And we see the combining of the spiritual and the physical in the Bekor. And God is saying, because Israel was my firstborn, and because I had to slay the firstborn to redeem my firstborn, now you, Israel, will set aside the specialness. You will not relish in the death of my creation. No, you will honor. As bad as Egypt and Pharaoh and everybody else was, I don't care. You don't relish in the death of humanity. But because I slayed the firstborn for you, to redeem you, now you will set aside the firstborn for all eternity, to be redeemed or to be sacrificed. Why? Because the firstborn exponentially expresses not only the desires, but the ways and the habits of God. Israel is and will always be the firstborn. Different teaching.
Let them swarm like the multitude of fish in the sea.
Oh, wow, you went off on a different thing because that goes into the signs, but I won't go into it.
Let's slap his hand while we can. Slap his hand while we can.
Nah. All right, so is there any questions? I mean, I don't see Jeremy typing in any questions, so I don't know. Anything? Is anybody getting anything from anybody?
All I see is you and Jesse, so I don't know. So let's wrap it up. So if we're to surmise, Frank, you're teaching on the darkness and the hidden things that come to light within this Torah portion. Jesse, as you're looking at the correlation between Judah and Israel regarding Joseph and this Torah portion about the redemption and the second return, or the second and final return. We also see that as much as anybody could have calculated and planned on and prophesied for this Exodus, there's teachings that there was a group of Hebrews that tried to leave earlier because they saw the time was right. We see this prominent in the idea that the first Pharaoh that slaughtered the innocents, or that cast the firstborn into the Nile to begin with. Why did he do so? It wasn't to cut the population. That's insanity. That's absurd. If anybody ever thinks that you're going to kill the firstborn male child is going to decrease the population, all you're going to do is decrease the population by that number that you kill. You don't affect the rest of the population, because all I need is one bull out in the field of 50 heifers, and I'm going to triple the number of cows I'm going to have within a couple of years. I don't need a lot of males, so it wasn't a population control. There's something else. And
besides, Blazing Saddles was just a movie.
Yeah. So there's something else going on here.
You didn't deplete the population. You reduced the competition.
Yeah, okay, but the point is that the redemption was known. It was renowned. It was known to Pharaoh, and it was known to Israel prior to Moses' birth. It was known and calculated by Egypt and Israel. But we had to tarry. We had to wait until the time that our tarrying and waiting couldn't happen anymore, and now we're leaving in haste. So as we try to calculate the return of Messiah, or the coming of Messiah, I prefer coming of Messiah as opposed to return of Messiah, but however it's viewed, as we're trying to calculate and look at the things around us as must be the time. The Messiah must be now. After all, Israel's been in a country for 70 years, and look at the things that's going on in the world, and yet we're still tarrying, we're still waiting until the moment happens where, get out of here, go. Take my gold, take my silver, get out. Are you going to be ready for that one?
Let us hope. Let us hope. It's interesting you're talking about that because reading Kabbalah today, one of the articles was, we are supposed to, in remembrance of this event, think about being redeemed every day. Every day we're leaving Egypt, Mitzrayim. So that's something on a spiritual level to think about, but it's also very physical to take to heart that we are to think and remember about the redemption.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got some very dear, close friends in Israel, on a Moshav, Ben David. His name is Gilad. Gilad was born and raised in Israel. His parents had moved to Israel during the 30s and 40s during World War II. He was born and raised there. He moved to South Africa, met his wife, and returned to Israel. So his wife is Jewish, but she's from South Africa, and they're there. Very, very wonderful, beautiful man. He trains and raises horses and trains horses, and he uses the horses to deal with troubled children. Just so many things. I wish I had time to go into detail with it, but Gilad always carries a pistol on his hip. I call him the Israeli cowboy. I mean, he really is. He's got an Aussie hat that he wears habitually. I don't think he's ever taken it off. I don't know how he had kids without it. He wears cowboy boots, and he carries a Makarov on his side. There's always an AK-47 in his pickup truck. Yeah, very few pickup trucks in Israel, but he drives a pickup truck. We got to meet him over Rosh Hashanah, and talking to him, he said, "I will never again fast for Yom Kippur," because he lived through as a child of the Yom Kippur War. And he said, "I will never again be caught off guard. I will always be ready." Now, this man is not in Israel. If you were to go to Israel and you ask someone if they were religious, they'd deny it outright, unless they were the extreme, almost zealot, but the extreme black hats, or the Hasids, or the ultra orthodox. Most Israelis deny that they're religious, but they all keep Passover, they all keep Yom Kippur, they all keep the holy days, they'll all keep Shabbat for that matter, or at least the majority of them will. And I found that interesting. I will never again be caught off guard because they attacked me. And he speaks of the atrocities that happened whenever he was a kid at that time. But for me, I experienced one of the most righteous spiritual men that I've ever met, and he was the least religious man. He longed for and strived for and was in love with Torah and God. But he would never again, be caught off guard. Now, I'm not proclaiming that you don't fast on Yom Kippur. I'm not claiming that you violate the commandments in the least. But to go with what you were saying, Frank, is you always have to be ready. Because this salvation, this redemption, this final redemption will happen at any moment, at any time.
Correct.
Unfortunately for all of humanity, redemption does not come without a cost and a price. If you think that it's going to be some magical guy in the clouds and everything's going to be happy and shiny for you, your redemption and your salvation, you're grossly mistaken, because the pattern is not that in Torah. The pattern is there's going to be horrible persecution. There will be a great price that's paid by all of humanity. As we see with the 10 plagues, this was not a pleasant time. 13 months, or however months it was that these plagues went on, there was horrible arguments. There was tearing apart of families. There was death and destruction of everything. Could you imagine your cattle dying for no reason one day, and now your crops are destroyed 3 months later, and you're striving and struggling, trying to figure out how I'm going to feed my kids? And this weirdo's coming up with sandals, throwing a stick on the ground, and it turns into a snake, and you're supposed to believe this? The point of this story really is the Messiah that's coming is never the one you expect. But the one you should expect is the one you will never recognize. Joseph wasn't recognized until he revealed himself. Don't ever pretend like you know who the Messiah is or what he is. The Messiah will reveal himself at a time that's least expected by you. Your salvation will come at the last possible moment you would expect it or want it. But you must always be ready and striving for it, because your faith is in God, not in a Messiah, not in a man, not in a religious system, and not in a political system. You trust in God and you do what God does. You do what he says. You don't do what a man says. You don't trust in a man or a man's teaching. Man's teaching is not always wrong. Don't misunderstand me here.
But it's not always right either.
But the
We
point,
try to learn truth based on our own words that we are saying today.
yes.
Don't take our word for it. Study it for yourself, and learn what truth is based on what we say, based on what other people say. Don't take it as truth from our lips alone.
Yeah, it's one of those things. We call it. Frank called this show 2.5 Opinions because all of mankind has opinions. We've got multiple opinions. I've got a different opinion about any one subject. I've got 2.5 opinions about my own opinion. But this show is not chasing after my opinion, Frank's opinion, Jesse's opinion, or anybody else's opinion. I'm not interested in man's opinion. I'm interested in God's opinion. I want to know what God thinks about his Torah. Because at the end of the day, these laws, like the laws of this firstborn that we see in our Torah portion, this isn't what God is wanting man to do. This is how God thinks. This is what God does.
So what is it about the commandments
that
tells us what God thinks?
Yeah, the commandments that God gives us is what God is. This is how he thinks. This is what he does. This is God. This isn't me telling my son to clean up his room, but yet I don't clean up my own room. That's not what this is. Stop treating God like a human. These commandments is how God thinks. This is what God does. When we start treating the commandments that, oh, this is how God does it, as opposed to, oh, I know God, and he told me to do this. No, that's just blaming God for why you're doing something. No, I do this because this is how God does it.
Right. Don't ever blame God for something you think up that you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, so God is telling me to sacrifice my firstborn animals or redeem my firstborn sons. And what did God do? he redeemed his firstborn. And by the way, if his firstborn is going to suffer, how much more do you think you're going to suffer? If his firstborn is the suffering servant of Isaiah 53, which I truly believe, I believe that Isaiah 53 is talking about Israel. That's a suffering servant, and that's a warning to me. Even Paul in Romans and in other places in the so-called New Testament warns us that, hey, if you think Israel got by, if you think Israel suffered, how much more are you going to suffer? Israel was God's firstborn. He was the example that we're supposed to follow. And if the example failed and suffered this much, how much more are you going to suffer? Be careful of how you treat and talk about Israel. That's Romans. So, Frank, I'm sorry. I could go on another 6 hours on.
Oh yeah, no. That we got time. We're close to the 2-minute warning though, so there's going to be a flag on the play, and Chris is going to have to back up 15 minutes.
Start over again.
So, just real quick question. I don't know if you looked at the text. I was asking if you wanted to do an AAR afterwards, but we can. All I have to do is hit stop broadcast, and we can still be connected. So, but in light of the portion, and the fact that it is God trying to demonstrate to us how he thinks and what he does. And as you said, we ought to be careful, because if his firstborn suffered, how much more would we all suffer? So, Jesse, any last words? Jesse?
I'm here. Last words, I could probably easily use the quote that just came from one of my younger brothers. Now, granted, he's quoting from I won't worry about where the quote is from, but the quote says, "Never take your knowledge from one source, else it will become bland and stale."
That's a good quote. I like that.
And in all honesty, that's what we try to portray here. Is with every opinion, every interesting fact about Torah, we want to discover truth, because truth is the multi-flavored, delicious meal. One source of knowledge is biting into a bland cracker.
Yeah. Again, the show is called Two and a Half Opinions simply because of the old joke: if you have two Jews together, you get three opinions, and that's a truncated version of it. But if we have Chris and Jesse and myself, and we're all looking at different things in Torah and different understandings, between the three of us, we might knock over a kernel of truth, and then that kernel of truth may help all of us. May not. Don't know. But that's what we're striving to do. So, last words, Chris?
The Rebbe has left the room. If I have a last word, it'll take too long. So
Okay.
I'm good.
So I guess I can announce, ladies and gentlemen, Elvis has left the building.
No, because that means God left. We don't want to do that.
Oh. Okay. The Rebbe?
He's going to what group was it? Elvis in Jerusalem.
There's a band group called the Moshav Band.
Oh yeah, the Moshav Band that we played. Yeah, is Elvis in Jerusalem. I longed to see him, and
They're essentially treating the Messiah or God in this particular incident as the way that Elvis's fans treated Elvis.
Okay.
He was the king.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're done. We actually need more time to go through everything, but that would be hours and hours and hours.
That'd be like the 4 hours that people who were listening just recently enjoyed listening to at around 1 earlier today.
Oh, really? What show was that, Jesse?
It was
Torah with friends.
Torah with Friends.
Ah,
Found it a
okay.
fascinating show.
Yeah.
And I hope you guys enjoy that one as much as you've enjoyed us.
Yes. And don't forget.
I'm sorry. That's like they enjoyed us more than them.
Sorry.
I know they're okay and they're trying. I hope you enjoyed them as
really?
much as you enjoy us.
Not what I meant. You know it. That's not what I meant. But I'm gonna go bury my head in the sand now.
Anyway,
And I hope
we'd
you
like.
enjoyed Frank and Jesse as much as you enjoyed me.
Okay, but how's that thing you say, Chris? But enough about me. How about you tell me about me?
That's right. But enough about me. Let's talk about how much you love me.
See? There you go. So, anyway, this is 2.5 opinions. We started off doing the lamb tube, and we're going to go on as long as we can, and hopefully, now, granted, there may be sometimes when we don't have enough people. Chris may be gone. I may be gone. If Jesse's bold enough, he might be able to do it himself. Jesse.
We'll see about that.
Yeah, but anyway, we would like to thank you for watching us and all of our different shenanigans. And hopefully, something came to light, something stirred you to study, something gave you more understanding. But really, we have a chat box. We would really love it if you would just send in a question while we're on the show, or just anything. Say you like us, say you don't like us, say hey, get off the air. Whatever. I don't care. Just put something in. All right. So does that sound about right, you two?
So, Shavua Tov.
Laila Tov,
Laila Tov velehitrot.
Lehitrot. Okay. So jazz hands. So this is 2.5 opinions. Thank you for listening. I'm Frank, the irreverent one.
I'm Yishai.
I'm not the Rebbe.
Yeah, sure. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Shabbat tov.